Section 2.1, Pi SMT Plugins. Here are the plugins we're going to look at first. We'll look at the Pi version and the licensing and the services plugins. I'll explain those as we go along. I'd like to show you how to use the message log plugin to search through the message log. And then finally we're going to look at the plugins for visualizing the data. Now, first one up is the Pi version. This simply is a plugin to look at the versions of what's on your system. So for example, for troubleshooting purposes, you may have an old beta version or something, or somehow you've gotten your versions messed up. So we want to fix that. First thing to do is check what versions are out there. So what I'd like to do, let me go ahead and start up a copy of Pi SMT. I'll do this from the Start menu. We'll run all programs. This is under Pi System. Here it is. And System Management Tools. So while that launches, there we go. Let's look at the operations first. Operations is where we'll find version. And as I said, it's simply a laundry list of the versions that you've got installed on this machine. There we go. So these are the different versions, and as you can see, they're all identical, which is good to know. It looks like I haven't gotten myself into a versioning problem here. The second is the licensing module. Licensing module is simply going to inspect what's in your license.dat. So for example, under resources, you can see if you have a maximum point count. I currently have an unlimited point count, but we do sell systems that some systems are limited in point count, and you can determine that right here. You can also determine how many seats are available for the different clients. There are some versions of Pi that restrict certain client connections, and certain numbers of connections are specified there. So you also find just general usage information, when this was first run, etc. General information about if this is a timeout version, is there a grace period, has it been, etc., etc. So all that licensing information is found within there. Again, probably not going to be needing that unless you're on the phone with tech support. And then lastly, we have the Pi services. Now if you choose Pi services, this is going to bring up a list of those services that are involved with Pi. And from here you can do all the nice things that people normally do with services. You can start and stop the service. As you can see, I can go into the dialog or do a right click and choose stop. I can set this service. Now those of you who are looking at this who are familiar with Windows may say, hey, this is kind of familiar. This is the same thing as the services applet. You're absolutely right. If you go down, go into the start menu, and if we do, let's do start run services.msc, you'll find many of these same things. So I can go down, scroll down to the Pi services and find these same things, and in fact go in and change their properties to auto versus manual, etc. So what we've tried to do is just make it a little bit easier by putting all these things right here in one place. Now that's all I was prepared to talk about for this, but I do want to make mention of one thing for those of you who are really observant. You may have noticed that I'm no longer using Pi Server 2 as my server. It's a little trick we do when we have a lot of different demos. We simply create the demos against a server called Pi Server 2, and then we kind of rig our DNS or our hosts file so that we point to our local machine as this pseudo machine that we call Pi Server 2. You might notice that that kind of a trick is going to fail under some circumstances, and in fact there are some applications that need to know the actual name of your computer. So if you're wondering why I'm no longer looking at Pi Server 2, it's because I couldn't. I cannot look at that and pass the test that it needs to be passed so that we can get access to the registry and look at these services. So anyway, just to mention, some of you may have noticed that I'm no longer using that Pi Server 2. That's probably the only time you'll see that in this course. The data section of SMT gives you access to the values in Pi, the current data and the recorded data, in addition to the ability to edit this. So let's take a look at the existing SMT. We'll go into the data section and choose current values. Now this gives you a choice of looking at one or many Pi tags and just look at their current value. Let me just reset this. I'm going to look for all the tags that begin with the letter CD, and it gives you a set of tags here. I've put all of them on there, and what I'm looking at is the current value. And if I were to click here, it would start updating this in real time. Now compare that to recorded values. Recorded value allows you to find a single tag. I'll choose sinusoid. And within that single tag, I can bring in events. It defaults to 1 hour. I would like to do 1 day. Now notice this right here, the boundary. This indicates how we're going to retrieve or how we're going to handle the edges of the time, the start and the end time. For example, inside means it will go back 1 day, which would go back to 11:54 a.m. and start getting all the values within 11:54 to the current 11:54. So the very first value it found was 134. Now watch what I would see if I had chosen to choose interp. It would go back to 11:55 now, and actually interpolate an 11:55 value for me. And if you were to say outside, it would actually go outside that 11:55 to the previous value, and that was 11:45. So it's just a different way of the set of data that you're going to be bringing in. Do we stay within the range of the start and the end time, or do we go exactly to the end, or do we go outside that boundary? I'm going to choose the default, which is inside. Now you can choose a filter expression if you want, and that will simply filter. And the filter expression is based on performance equation syntax. And again, performance equation syntax is something we're going to cover later when we cover performance equations. But for example, I would say sinusoid less than 50, for example. I'll go ahead and get the events. Now you can see all you're doing is retrieving from when that is true. So I'll remove that filter and get the full value. Now the other thing you can do is you can also say, let's take a look to see if anything has come in using these or having this status, annotated, substituted, or questionable. As you can see, in my case, we do have a few that have been substituted. This one right here has been substituted, so that shows up as true for substituted. And this value right here has been annotated. And that shows up as the annotation shows up here, or the bit shows up, the annotation bit shows as true in this listing. Now that actually, the annotation itself will show up in the client tools like ProcessBook and DataLink. So these are two of the three things you find in data. The last one will be the archive editor, which we'll look at next. This is the message log search engine, and it's part of SMT. It just gives you a nice graphical user interface to searching through the System Manager's message log. So I'm going to switch over to my message log search. It's in the operations section under message logs. I've specified a time, 1st of October 2007, to the current time. That should give me plenty of messages, and I'll just click on this. This is going out, and it's retrieving, so you can see all different types of messages. And the thing we'd suggest you do is, search for messages like failed, cannot, error. Here we're getting a bunch of add event failed. I'd want to track these down, try to figure out what's going on here. Let's look for the word error. There's a whole variety of things that are just kind of nuisance messages, and it's amazing how much of system management is just looking at the same messages over and over again and being able to determine what's nuisance alarms and what isn't. But we tend to use this message log to view things like the startup and the shutdown of the Pi server. Let me go back to looking at all this here. Again, there we go. Yeah, if I started up my server, I can inspect one by one all the messages that are coming up as I do that startup and shutdown if I am having some type of problem. You can also use this to identify when clients are connecting and disconnecting if you're doing some interface troubleshooting, for example. Now, in addition to looking at the regular System Manager's message log, this is the server-based message log, which you can access from anywhere. You can also look at the local message logs. This local to this particular machine. Now, because of the extraordinarily bad resolution I have for doing these recordings, this has all been kind of jammed up together. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger so that we can see it. There we go. Yeah, what we're looking at here is these are the different message logs that are local. And now I've just managed to open up that, and I can in fact search through this as well. So for example, let's say I am having a problem with the OPC interface. I'll just look for all those things that are associated with the OPC interface, in this local message log, and now it's pulling those up. So you can see there's a lot going wrong with that interface. Oh, here we're getting a PyConnect fail. So if this is a substantive problem, not just a nuisance, then that's when I would start doing some serious troubleshooting, looking at the startup of the interface, seeing if there's a privilege problem, for example, looking for any other messages in the server-based message log that might correspond with the startup of that interface. So the last thing I'd like to demonstrate is you can't export all of this. So if I do a right mouse click and choose export, I can export this to a text file, to a CSV file, etc. Now here are the definitions for those three things we saw earlier, the annotated, substituted, and questionable. Annotated indicates that, well, there's additional information. It's things that have been stored as part of the value of that tag, and the clients are going to be able to display that. So Process Book and Data Link will be able to show what that annotation is. We do have different tools that can be used to write the annotation. For one thing, the archive editor can be used for writing annotations, but also through the SDK you can use the different clients to write annotations. Substituted indicates that the value has simply been replaced. There's some circumstances with interfaces where values can be replaced, or with manual logger information where you can substitute a value deliberately using your manual input mechanism, either PyManualLogger or the putVal function in DataLink, and that will show up as substituted status. And then questionable, well, this is something that's supported by some of our interfaces. We can have, depending on kind of our confidence in the process data, we can flag something as questionable, and then that would be something that the interface would have to set, or as I said, the user can also set that based on or using that PyArchive editor that I just mentioned, or using SDK tools. Before we move on to the archive editor, I want to point out that within recorded values you can actually insert new events or edit events, but if you're going to be doing a lot of working with the data and actually manipulating the data, you should probably go over to the archive editor, which can do those things plus a whole lot more. So let me go ahead and bring in a value. Let's go back and get the last 2 days of the tag name called sinusoid. And from here, what I can do is I can manipulate this by going in and simply writing in real time. So for example, if this is a value that's not correct, I can simply change that to 28 and then go ahead and save this change. And that's something that's now going to be a permanent part of the archive. And as you can see, it's being identified now as a substituted value. Now, if I would like to provide an explanation for this, that's something I can do as well. I'll do a right click on that, do annotations, and I'll just simply add an annotation. This was substituted for demonstration purposes. So that's the annotation that's associated with this. I'll go ahead and save that annotation. And again, now if you notice, it's been marked as annotated as well. So the client applications now will be able to show this new value. It will show the annotation associated with that value. And as you might guess, also you can delete events as well. So for example, here's some of my events from earlier. This was a substituted event. Here's an annotated event. Let's say I'd like to replace that or delete that. Just select that, choose delete selected event, and now it's deleted from the archive.